Hi, I'm David Gregg with the Rhode Island Natural History Survey, and you are watching the February 2024 meeting of the Rhode Island Woodland Partnership. The Rhode Island Woodland Partnership is a collaboration among foresters, landowners, conservationists, and agencies to advance the stewardship and long-term protection of Rhode Island's woodlands for the benefit of the local economy, ecological values, and community enjoyment and health. Each monthly meeting features a theme, guest, or issue. This month, we're going to hear about the PVD Tree Plan. What is the PVD Tree Plan? It's a collaborative project to develop a vision and action for creating a just, resilient, and equitably distributed urban forest in Providence. Hope you enjoy. The Rhode Island Natural History Survey presents videos to showcase the animals, plants, geology, and natural systems that surround us, and the people and organizations working to understand and conserve them.
Well, welcome everyone to the February 2024 Rhode Island Woodland Partnership virtual meeting. Good to see you all here today. We're looking forward to a presentation on the PVD or Providence Tree Plan. And since I don't believe that we are all acquainted with each other, let's just first go around and you can introduce yourself and your organizational affiliation, if that's appropriate, or you're interested in participating in the partnership meeting today. And it often works well if you pass it on to call on someone else next until we're all done. So I'm Christopher Riley. I'm the co-coordinator of the Rhode Island Woodland Partnership. I'm a forestry specialist and research associate with URI. Also have a practice called Sweet Birch Consulting. I would also do partner work with NRCS through URI. And I'm going to pass it over to Kate.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Sales. I am the other co-coordinator of the Woodland Partnership, and I am the director of the Rhode Island Land Trust Council. I'm going to pass it to Tone.
Hello, my name is Tony Goodday Irvin. My pronouns are they, them. I work as a planting coordinator for the Providence Neighborhood Planting Program. I'm a steering committee member on the PVD Tree Plan as a concerned citizen in a underserved zip code, undertreed zip code of Providence. And I also work as an inventory arborist for Davy Resource Group out of Worcester. And I've been doing urban forestry for about 5 years. And I will pass it to Jordan.
Hi, I'm Jordan. My pronouns are she, her. I am a staff member as well at Providence Neighborhood Planting Program and a PVD Tree Plan co-coordinator. And I'll pass it to Cassie to round out our
presenter team, crack presenter team. I'm Cassie Theringer. I am the executive director of the Providence Neighborhood Planting Program, PNPP, where we do community based tree planting and tree stewardship and maintenance and training and advocacy work in Providence. And in that capacity, I have also am involved as a kind of co-coordinator of the PVD Tree Plan process. And I live in Providence. I'll pass over to, Wolf.
So my name is Wolf Mueller. I'm a consulting forester here in Rhode Island. I own my own firm, WT Mueller Forest Consulting and Management. Been working in the state since I graduated from Paul Smith College 3 years ago. And yeah, well, as a forester, you got to be plugged into the tree community here. I'll hand it off to Paul Dolan.
Paul Dolan here, Area Director for the RC&D Council, statewide. David Gregg.
I never know if there's a Greg on the call. I'm David Gregg. I'm the director of the Rhode Island Natural History Survey, and I'm your delinquent video YouTube jockey. I finally got the December meeting up. My control panel tells me it'll take 90 more minutes to validate the file, but that was really interesting. I got to rewatch the previous presentation on urban forestry, and so that will be available to people to watch in the recording. And I will try to work my way backwards through the backlog of Woodland Partnership meetings over time. But anyway, I got that one out, and looking forward to hearing what people have to say today. So let's see, I will call on Scott Rurin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Scott, Director of Conservation at the Audubon Society of Rhode Island, forest ecologist, forest explorer, tree hugger, etc. And I'll pass it to Kate.
Hi, folks. I'm Kate McPherson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm Save the Bay's Narragansett Bay River Keeper. And I'm going to pass it to Terry Meyer.
Hey, Kate. Innocent bystander cycling off the board at Audubon, interested, want to see what's up. And I'm going to pass it on to Amanda.
Hi all. I don't know what the assignment specifically was, but Amanda Freitas, I'm the Wildlife Action Plan Community Liaison. That's a joint project with the Rhode Island Natural History Survey and the Rhode Island DEM Division of Fish and Wildlife. And I have no idea who's gone. Sorry, I was on late. Sam, maybe?
I haven't gone, so I'll go. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Tebow, and I work at the Northern Rhode Island Conservation District as the Land Conservation Program Manager. I'm mostly working on NRCS contracts. One of them that's related to this is a forest easement program. And I will pass it to Melissa.
Thanks, Sam. I'm Melissa Hayden. I'm a biologist with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service in Rhode Island. I'll pass it to Danielle.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm Danielle Shannon. I work with the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science and the USDA Northern Forest Climate Hub. And the work that I do is to help folks consider climate change risks and vulnerabilities and adaptation options in their long-range planning. And I'm working with Christopher and others. I'll pass it to Molly. I don't know if you've gone yet.
Oh no, Molly, we can't hear you.
Well, I can do the best I can here. We got Molly Henry with the Green Infrastructure Center, and she is the urban forestry planner. I hope I have that close to correct. And why don't we send it over to Lou?
Hi, I'm Lou Allard. I'm the Urban and Community Forestry Program Coordinator at DEM, the Division of Forest Environment. And I think that's everybody.
Is there anyone who hasn't gone yet? All right, I think that went quite well. Without further ado, we will hand it over to the folks working on the Providence Tree Plan from the Providence Neighborhood Planting Program. I'm sure that some of us are quite familiar with the program. For others, it may be a bit newer. I'll ask everyone, while they're giving their presentation, if we can mute ourselves, and then there'll be plenty of time for discussion and Q&A and all that afterwards. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher, and thank you, everybody, for having us. We're super psyched to be joining this kind of broader network of tree forest advocates to talk about this specific work in Providence with the urban lens. And we had a few years ago, I don't know, time is a flat circle, but a few years ago we joined on a walk with some folks from the Woodland Partnership. Right, Kate, was that the Woodland and Christopher? Yeah, okay. When we were sort of earlier in the process of this, creating this plan, and we did a walk and talk, and that was, I think some of you were there, but we're really glad now to sort of have this plan and come back to talk to you all about it. And so really briefly, just to give some context about how this plan came to be and what, who it is, who and what is it. So we the three of us in this call right now are here in this call sort of wearing, well, we always all wear many hats, but we're sort of wearing hats working for PNPP, but PNPP is just one of many partners and kind of coordinating, supporting groups that came together to create this plan. Really, as we started to look in Providence at, how are we addressing some of these key challenges that face trees in cities and, increasing canopy and dealing with increased threats of climate change and better like meeting the really critical kind of environmental justice and health equity needs of residents. We're like, we need a big picture plan, a vision, not just it's more than just the management plan side of things. We need like bring everyone together and say, all right, what's our big picture goal? Where are we going? And we very intentionally wanted that to be very, have a lot of collaboration and leadership from the city of Providence, the municipality, but not just to be a city plan. We spent some time at the beginning of this process looking at how other cities had done this and seeing what would really lead to a kind of dynamic vision setting and roadmap. And we assembled a bunch of stakeholders, PNPP, Movement Education Outdoors, the Nature Conservancy, and the Parks Department of the city and the Forestry Division were sort of the groups kind of forming the container that moved this plan forward. But it has really been a community-led and collaborative project that has taken a few years now. I think it's been like 3 years since we started saying we were going to do this plan. And I think that's a lot of things like a pandemic arrived and all sorts of circumstantial things. But also I think we know and knew from the outset that to do this work in the way we wanted to do it, it was going to be slow, and it was sort of had to be slow. And if we were doing it right, it was going to be slow. And that the process of creating this plan and kind of engaging stakeholders and community members in the conversations about what do we want and need for our urban forest, that was also kind of starting to implement the plan. Like that was a valuable part of the work, was just having those conversations and bringing people together and talking about trees and urban forestry. So just a quick to touch on our how we kind of gathered the input that has informed this. We really, our guiding principle as we sort of approach this work with a tree equity lens, and we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about tree equity, but I think just basically that refers to the distribution of trees in a city and where we do and don't have trees and all of the things that that corresponds to demographically and health-wise and socially. And so as we knew that was our key priority, we really looked to, those closest to a problem are often those closest to the solution to that problem. And so that was sort of one of our guiding frameworks as we work to really engage people, and not just in a way where like, okay, we hired a consultant, they're going to come in and give us boilerplate text for the plan, and they're going to do a survey, and cool, we got input, and then, we have this plan that maybe sits on a shelf forever. But how do we really go out and have these robust conversations about what are the challenges and issues and concerns and hopes and dreams that people living particularly in these low tree canopy neighborhoods have? So we did countless range of activities to do that, like stationing, outside of popular grocery store in South Providence, tabling at all sorts of events, accosting people outside the library. Want to talk about trees? Want to fill out a survey? Doing our survey was in 9 languages that are the most commonly spoken languages in Providence. Convening stakeholder groups that were more specific, sort of folks, practitioners, or people working in, workforce development and urban forestry, like gather those folks around and have a conversation. All sorts of community and on the ground, and also other more kind of industry specific input gathering. And so that is all what we synthesized with their steering committee made up of practitioners and also community representatives to turn into the the plan itself and identify its key recommendations and challenges. So Tone, do you want to pick up there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so just like with doing any work of this nature and doing it well, we did find some key challenges and also some key focal points that we wanted to highlight in our plan. And Providence is susceptible to the same kind of pitfalls as many New England towns. Its roadways are based off of indigenous footpaths and trade routes, and colonial towns were developed over that during a time when trees and urban infrastructures were not thought of as closely related as they are today. And the Industrial Revolution highly impacted how land was used in our urban settings. And this caused segregation across classes and races as vestiges of its era. It's still in place today, but it's also reinforced through redlining and policy. And because of this, our urban tree canopy is not evenly distributed, just like how wealth is not distributed evenly throughout our city. So canopy coverage, as you can see from our series of really awesome maps here, shout out to Movement Education Outdoors for doing the groundwork and making these. But canopy coverage is heavily concentrated around the wealthiest, whitest parts of the city, except for this little blip down here, which is Roger Williams Park, the big one, not the state park. And then over here is the on that first upper left hand map. Those like dark green spots are where canopy coverage is most present, and the lighter spots kind of loosely correlating with the south side, downtown, the upper south side, and 95. That's where there is the least amount of trees in the city. So trees generally exclude, or well-treed areas are generally excluding low-income communities of color. And these are people who already face the first and worst impacts of climate change without or with limited access to health, environmental, economic, and social benefits of trees, like air filtration and stormwater sequestration, especially thinking about how much 95 was flooding this past year. So in the work of the PVD Tree Plan, reaching tree equity across the city, across neighborhoods, is an overarching goal of the plan. But it's also really important to highlight this second piece of the definition of tree equity, because not only are trees not evenly distributed across the city, neither are the resources to take care of them, which is a key mechanism for how tree inequity, like other environmental injustices, is reproduced. A lot of the core problems facing our urban forests are similar to those facing more rural forests, even if they look different in the city. We're grappling with how to support ongoing stewardship, how to support and protect trees on privately owned land. No resources or little resources to support tree planting or maintenance on private property, despite the fact that the majority of our city's trees are located on private property, and as is the majority of our city's potential space for new trees. Low-income neighborhoods of color have fewer resources to support stewardship and establish, care, or maintain mature trees. It is also affected by historical disinvestment, leading to issues like sidewalk damage and lack of ongoing zoning enforcement. And without these resources, trees can become a burden for residents, causing damages to property, lowering aesthetic values, and just in general kind of keeping all of us from being in close community with the trees and embracing them. Because whether or not we embrace them, they are really vital and invaluable to how we conduct our lives and how our lives and our health continue to go on. So Jordan, do you want to talk about canopy targets for a sec?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Tone. So as Tone pointed out and articulated really beautifully, sort of the ultimate goal, the vision of the plan is true tree equity across the city of Providence, so that there's a thriving and healthy and resilient urban forest that then supports communities' health and well-being across the city, and everyone has equal access to those health and climate and economic benefits that trees offer. And that'll take a lot of work to get there. There's a lot to do. So during our planning process, part of what we did is we created an initial tree canopy target to guide our work towards that vision of real tree equity in the years to come. So we were lucky in our planning process to have a lot of really robust data to work with. And one of those tools was the Tree Equity Score Analyzer. So using all sorts of tree canopy data at a really high resolution, as well as climate data, health data, demographic data, we zeroed in on what we're calling tree equity focus areas across the city. And these are places where there's low tree canopy and also a concentration of communities that are vulnerable to the effects of climate change for a number of reasons. And we sort of triangulated that list that we came up with through our number crunching with some ground truthing, some on the ground knowledge, and this map here shows the areas that we landed on, and you'll see it corresponds really closely to the patterns that we saw in the previous set of maps that Tone was showing us, where there's the lowest tree canopy and also the highest concentrations of folks of color, low income folks, especially high asthma rates, high temperatures. It's all connected, of course. So then moving from these tree equity focus areas, we created a goal to increase tree canopy in these focus areas by 50% over the next 25 years, while maintaining existing canopy levels across the city. So this goal, we hope, it's ambitious, for sure, but we also think it's achievable. It will require us to plant and maintain an estimated 30,000 or so trees, or an average of a little more than 3,000 per year for the next 10 years. But of course, increasing canopy, we all know, doesn't only require us to plant trees, it also means fostering and caring for all of these trees so that they can have a long, healthy life, so that they can survive and thrive where they're planted. So that's really what a lot of our plan is trying to address, because we all know, yeah, you can't just put a tree in the ground. Doesn't stop there. Cassie, do you want to kick us off with talking about some of the recommendations?
Yes, and I think I assume, I hope all of you share this kind of mindset that Jordan just alluded to, which we are constantly beating the drum in urban forestry of it's not just about planting. There's so much more. Everyone loves to plant a tree. Great photo op, super important. You need to plant them. But then what? To grow canopy, you got to do more than planting. Thumbs up from Molly knows this better than anyone. It's actual stewardship and maintenance resources and programs. It's cultivating the citywide awareness and buy-in and relationships and training programs and funding, and all of that needs to be in place in addition to planting. So as we started to kind of develop the nitty-gritty recommendations that are in the plan, and there are, I don't know how many, 40 pages of them, that everybody is encouraged to dig in and read the whole plan and all of its recommendations. But we grouped them into a few kind of key sections or buckets. And those were community leadership and engagement, and sort of how this work is being steered. How are we ensuring that people from low canopy parts of the city but all sorts of stakeholders are engaged in and active in and having a say in and kind of invested in this work of creating a healthy urban forest, and what are the mechanisms and structures that will ensure that. Planting, for sure, got to get those trees in the ground, super important. Maintenance and management, and that really gets at that piece of how do we make sure the trees survive, both when they're young and, you know, getting established, but then also over time, and how, you know, are we protecting and caring for mature trees, and our canopy overall. Workforce development ties into that last one a lot, but that was something that came up over and over again in all of our conversations, and we're lucky we have a strong kind of existing network of folks working on workforce development related to kind of green industries and environmental work. And so that is an area where it's a sort of, there's a lot of opportunity to connect that to this tree work and to implementing the plan. And then funding and financing and policy and planning. What are the revenue streams and the, you know, potential mechanisms for ensuring ongoing robust funding for this work, and the really specific policy levers and that, you know, can be adjusted and put in place to keep this work going. So that was that's sort of the general categories of work. 3 themes that emerged really commonly throughout in all of these buckets and throughout our recommendations were that we kept being at a certain point where you're like, we have to identify these somewhere as like these 3 themes, because they come up in almost every conversation had about the plan. And that was coordination. In every one of these buckets, we were identifying need for better coordination among all sorts of nonprofit practitioner organizations within city municipal departments, between municipal and state, between, you know, state municipal and nonprofit, between community, and just coordination, huge. Overall capacity building, just often, you know, it's in fact easier to get money sometimes to plant trees, like actually install trees in the ground, but how do you grow the programs and organizations and, you know, municipal departments to really have capacity to do this, to get where we want to go. And community leadership, that was something that in every area, how are we engaging people in really taking a lead and advocating for this work. So that's sort of the overview of these recommendations. We are not going to, don't worry, go through all however many hundreds of recommendations are in this plan, but we are going to save time for you to ask questions and discuss things, but we were just going to do a kind of highlight of some of the specific key recommendations in these sections that we felt were really important or relevant to share with you all today. And we do encourage you to dive into the plan and take a look at the implementation dashboard that is with it and see what parts of the work might be relevant to you or your organization. But Jordan, you want to take us into some specific recommendations?
Yes. So starting kind of on the community leadership and engagement side of things, as Cassie said earlier, one of what I see as the biggest successes of the planning process overall is that we got a lot of practitioner organizations and community members and stakeholders of all kinds together, and together very often for a lot of time, sort of building relationships across work that can happen too often in silos, and also I think starting to create some new momentum around community oversight and leadership of urban forest management, which so often can sort of happen as a top-down kind of process that where decision making and isn't really accessible to people living in neighborhoods where trees are getting planted and maintained or not planted and not maintained. So one of our key goals is to build structures that will allow for really robust community-driven urban forestry management and decision-making processes. And one of those is to create an urban forest community advisory board as a outside of government entity to provide recommendations and sort of guide the implementation of this plan. We're also working in the process of sort of building out networks of tree ambassadors and neighborhood level tree planning forums, and really sort of figuring out how we can create frameworks and infrastructure for just a lot more robust community engagement and outreach. So much of this is about getting people thinking about trees, talking about trees, and also connected to the decision-making structures in urban forestry so that they can have a say in what goes on. Cassie, I'll pass to you for our next one.
Yeah, another really key thing that emerged, and partly we were sort of piloting programs and initiatives as part of the planning process, was sort of some of the core partner practitioner organizations, starting to test out what might it look like to, start a youth-led young tree, maintenance watering program. But so things in that maintenance and planting and workforce development area were really how to connect those dots of economic justice and economic empowerment and workforce development. We know we have a huge need for skilled arborists and urban foresters. There's a real pipeline issue locally and nationally. And there's good jobs, family supporting jobs to be had in this sector. And how do we ensure that we're training up the people who, first of all, the people who have been most impacted by tree inequity or environmental injustice and other kind of forms of inequities. How are we offering those people pathways to plug into this work? While also providing some of that critical, for instance, young tree maintenance. That's how can we, it's tough to be a street tree in the narrow sidewalks of Providence. It's not the easiest life. It takes a lot of tree LC and care and watering. And so we piloted some programs over the past couple of years, like working with Groundwork Rhode Island's Youth Green Team to do water by bike watering of young trees. More recently, we have a program with a jobs training program, Garden Time, who works with justice system impacted folks on urban forestry training. And then this Canopy crew is out. They're sort of learning, really honing their skills on urban forestry and arboriculture, and they're out doing structural pruning and care and mulching and inventorying and assessment of young trees. So that kind of, I think, we have some pilot things underway, but there's a lot more to be done and a lot of recommendations around sort of best practices for expanding in that area. That is pretty exciting. Tone, back to you.
Sure. So in regards to structures for coordination among practitioners, the data that we have in the forms of tracking activities and inventories is, like we said, incredibly pivotal to what we do. We have, there's a tree keeper program for the system, for the town that has a living tree inventory within it that in theory gets updated as maintenance occurs on it. And the public not only was like the initial inventory, partially volunteer based, but the public does have like some access to that without the need of an account, to be able to see what kind of trees are on their street and on their block. And in general, we're trying to make data publicly available whenever possible. Obviously, things like risk assessment is not necessarily something that the general public needs to know, but for just general purposes, it's always good to be transparent on some things. And we're advocating for updated and standardized species selection within the town. Not everything necessarily gets put on an endangered or invasive species list that we know spreads out over time, because sometimes it takes policy a little longer to get enacted than it takes for things to seed themselves into our woodlots. So trying to be smart about planting and doing things like planting diversely is really important. And in general, updated best practices, management around sidewalk conflicts, SNEP recommendations, trying as best as possible to adhere to ADA guidelines, especially when putting in new trees, is really important. And we're, in general, we're calling for an overarching shift towards proactive management from a reactive management standpoint at this point. Just so that things like being able to interact with trees, not on like a as needed risk-based basis, but instead doing routine pruning cycles and being able to train trees how we want, so that they don't necessarily have to be cut and pruned as drastically by power companies, is important. And this also entails developing more detailed specific plans and collaborative management structures for creating resilient urban forests in the short and long term by way of thinking about pest threats, once again, species selections, climate impacts. I think we all just got our hardiness zones changed this past year, and promoting best management practices across multiple private and public UF actors. We also want to strengthen city policies and protect existing trees, because the benefits of trees, increase not just in a linear form over time. A 50-year-old beautiful tree that hasn't had like a topping pruning done to it provides many times over the benefits that a young tree would in terms of carbon sequestration, in terms of stormwater sequestration, in terms of filtering out pollutants, in terms of reducing heat island effect in the area directly around it. It's really important that trees reach maturity. And we want to hopefully expand protections on significant trees, reducing the diameter that is defined as down to 24 inches at diameter breast height, which is roughly 4.5 feet. And we'd also like to update zoning ordinances, including adjusting required tree canopy percentage to reflect tree equity priorities, higher in some cases higher in a tree equity focused area versus like a very well treed area with a lot of resources. Require developers to provide an establishment care contract and provide a list of trusted establishment care providers by neighborhood, including trainees and workforce development programs. And above all else, increase enforcement capacities accordingly, because ordinances are great, but if you can't enforce them, then like what do they do? And this means working between city forestry and the Department of Inspections and Standards, and just interdepartmentally in general. those lines of communication have to be open and a welcome open door at that. Jordan, would you like to talk about next steps?
Yeah, so where are we now in this multi-year process? We released the plan itself in December. Now we're going around talking to groups, whoever we can, about the plan, why it matters, how folks can fit into it and support it, work on implementing different components. And as Cassie mentioned, we're sort of in the thick of working out a pretty wide range of initial pilot programs to develop and test some of the new models we're describing. And many of these are supported through kind of individually focused grants. We got an EPA collaborative problem solving grant that will support us in building out our urban forest community advisory board and some of the community governance and engagement structures, as well as an initial yard tree planting pilot. There are lots of little exciting pilots happening, and now we're in a stage where we're looking to broaden the scope of that work, institutionalize them, and sustain them. So right now, our sort of current overarching need is broad buy-in and funding. So through our community outreach and conversations with hundreds of people in the process, people want trees in the city. Our survey said that 98.3% of the respondents thought we should increase investment into Providence's trees. So among the community, the support is there, the buy-in is there, and we need to get it from decision makers as well, and funders. So we can take all the help we can get from anyone by talking about the plan and spreading the word so that we can increase the institutional support for everything that has come out of all of these community conversations. And yeah, on this slide, we have just wanted to throw up some of the ways that you can follow along with the work. Read the plan itself, it's on our website, as is the executive summary, if you don't feel like reading 120 odd pages, which is understandable. But I would encourage that you look at them because there's some good stuff in there. But yeah, with that, I think we can hopefully have some time for questions and yeah.
Thanks so much. It was a wonderful overview. Appreciate again all three of you, being here to walk us through it. And we do indeed have time for questions and discussion, and can throw it open to everyone for that now. It may make sense to go back to our gallery view and share the presentation, and see some hands up already. Starting with some of our urban forestry stalwarts. How about Doug Still, who's joined us from is the principal of This Old Tree. Anything, you just want to unmute yourself, and you've already done that. There you go.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say I think it's a great plan, and the Rhode Island Woodland Partnership should do anything that we can to help support it, as an organization. It was many years in making. And I have a question about the Urban Forest Advisory Board, which I think is like a critical component to making this work, and that involvement. And I was just wondering, have you started conversations with the city about that, or if you've got any feedback, and how you plan to kind of get that, like, how will it be chosen, and how will you get that off the ground?
Jordan, or do you want to chime in, or do you want me to
take it away?
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the earliest, most also Doug was a key part of the early foundation creation of this plan. Full disclosure, Doug. So though he shifted roles partway through it, none of this would have been possible if not for the foundation Doug helped set. Just have to say that. And we're eternally grateful for his ongoing involvement. But yeah, I think that was a key. The Urban Forest Community Advisory Board was a key recommendation, and the idea was that it not be a city commission, like a straight up city board, but that it be this sort of inside outside government. That was something that a lot of thought and discussion went into. What should that look like? It has to, I think it's key that it have city buy-in and participation, if it's going to have any meaning and, impact. But also, how can it have the flexibility to be, somewhat more of an advocate and community led. And so we're really lucky to have gotten a community problem solving grant from the EPA that is going to, over the next couple of years, help us. It's literally called collaborative problem solving. It's to bring people together to test and set up sort of governance structures and problem solving structures. So we don't know all the answers yet, I think, to that question, Doug, but we know kind of the framework. We know what the recommendation was, and we know what worked for the steering committee model that led the plan. And so now we're like, all right, let's test. What should it look like? Who are the, that board needs to be staffed and resourced, with some coordination capacity. Who should that be? Which organizations or city divisions should that be housed in? So I think answers still to come. Tony or Jordan, if there's anything you want to chime in with.
Let me go to Molly next.
Can you all hear me now? Okay, I think I figured out the issue. So, great presentation. I've watched this presentation a couple of times and I always learn something new, but PNPP did such a great job really sticking to having a community-centered plan, which is not something you see a lot. It's usually a municipality contracting out with a consultant from the outside and kind of leading the charge, and the public engagement is sometimes lacking. And so I really commend all the PNPP team, Doug included, for really having a community-centered plan. And I know it took a lot of time. And, I think that work requires a lot of time. So I just wanted to say that. But I had a more technical question, which was that you mentioned as one of the recommendations, there was a zoning ordinance update recommendation to have a increase in tree planting requirements for a certain tree equity area. So I just wanted to know if you had a sense of what that threshold was for the tree equity, if you're using tree equity score or other measures to figure out that threshold.
I think what we were originally imagining and are still holding in mind is the tree equity focus areas that we laid out in the plan itself, which were created in part drawing on tree equity score analyzer data, although not necessarily tree equity scores themselves. And then one question then would be, how do we over time update the focus areas so that they're not static and instead respond to what will hopefully be changes and hopefully increases in tree canopy across the city.
So just a quick clarification. So Jordan, the map that you showed where you talked about how you develop the priority areas, that kind of green area, then all those tree equity priority areas would then be included in that zoning update. That makes sense. Great. Thank you.
Go to Scott next.
Yeah, great project. I don't get into urban forest very much, but I do have a biological conservation question. I know it's hard to grow trees in urban settings, but are you trying to strive to plant native species?
Tone, want to take that one? We all talk about this all the time, but Tone's got some great.
Yeah. So as first of all, as an Indigenous person, I definitely like have a strong bias towards native trees. I think that only planting non-native trees can cause urban forests to not be able to plug in as well to the rest of the ecosystem at large. But I also know, as somebody who also, on the one hand does this work that's very community based in Providence, but on the other hand does that sort of contracted inventory and management plan work in my other job. I know that it's not necessarily a feasible goal to only plant natives when you're also trying to counteract issues with age diversity and issues with species diversity in general. It's a normal pitfall of New England towns and cities that maples are generally overplanted, and that oftentimes we either have very little canopy and a very young tree population, or we have ongoing planting but a large aging tree population, maybe in parks or at schools or something like that. And so having a proactive plan that looks at not only native species, but also non-native species is a really healthy goal. And it can do things like help reduce the effects of different diseases and infestations that might only affect one family of trees more than another, so that in any given year we'll still have a fairly thriving and resilient urban forest, even if, let's say, like last year, sycamore anthracnose was a big issue, as was Botrytis canker, and we're starting to have things like beech leaf disease come in to our landscape. And so it takes not only native trees, but also really complex planting strategies and management strategies in order to have a healthy and thriving forest. But I certainly do prefer native species, and I think that we should do a lot more to diversify the native species that we also plant.
Go to Lou for the next question.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Yeah, awesome presentation. I was just wondering, you said the canopy goal increase of 50% in those core equity areas. I was just curious how you got to that 50% as the goal, and what was the total amount that you could potentially plant there? Or are you going to have impervious surface removal, things like that, or do you have that space to plant all those trees?
Jordan, you want to?
Okay, Cassie, jump in. We can take this one together. Good question. We spent a lot of time wrestling with this. A lot of time. In some ways, how we arrived at the number itself is really was sort of back engineered by starting with the number of trees planted that we felt might be, what was at that kind of fine balance between ambitious and achievable, with scaling up, but reasonable scaling up over the next 10 years. And from there, and then sort of separately in parallel, we developed our tree equity focus areas. And we considered, okay, how much canopy coverage increase would we see if we planted all of these trees in these areas? And also, of course, that involves reckoning with how much plantable space actually exists in these areas. That's where in some places the ground truthing process kind of came into play. Luckily, among our team, we have people who are out there, Cassie and Tone among them, who are out there constantly on the streets and know block by block where we have opportunities for street trees, where lots are big enough where if we could expand a yard planting program could get more trees in the ground. So a lot of that was grounded in that kind of on the ground knowledge, in addition to the plantable space data that we got from the urban tree canopy assessment through UVM in 2021 and tree equity score analyzers parameters around population density were also kind of useful proxies in trying to guide that that calibration. Cassie, do you want to add anything to
But
that?
just to one part of your question, that would involve depave it, like that will assume that's not just looking at already currently pervious surfaces. That will involve depaving. Not only, you know, there's lots of yard space and but yeah, that's depaving ahead of us for sure.
Excellent. Well, we'll talk more about that later.
Doug, looks like you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I just had a comment. 50% sounds like a lot unless you consider that you're starting with a low number to begin with. And so that many trees, like if you plant, you know, try to plant 100% more trees in a low canopy neighborhood, you're still not going to reach the number of trees in another neighborhood in Providence. So I see where the numbers came in and where, you know, sometimes you just got to pick a number that's, you know, you can keep in your head too. There was probably some rounding.
Yeah, and the target is very much intended to be kind of a guidepost for us, knowing that, as you're saying, Doug, even if we meet this target, it only gets us so far. So it's sort of an in-between, it's a path to this kind of ideal end goal, because we do need to know, okay, how many trees are we trying to plant per year for now and where? So it's an attempt to get us there.
Yes, and in theory, canopy increases with time, even if you don't necessarily plant a tree and just maintain what you have, and continue just to refill your own stocking level. But where we want trees is more than just like right of way, like tree pits. It's also in private land and at schools and other types of off right of way municipal land, along DOT right of ways potentially, especially after all of the construction on like 95 and the 610 connector. We've definitely at PNPP have gotten a lot of, well, more than one in multiple neighborhoods along the highways, complaints about, now that all the trees are gone, I can hear everything that's happening on the highway, and when can we fix that? And that's definitely something that our community feels every single day.
So I'll ask a question. It is a tremendous plan, and as you know, as a Providence resident, it's you know, really been worth waiting for, and you know, starting to see it develop and take shape here. But it's going to take you know, a lot of resources from, you know, not just the tree planting and the maintenance, of course, but you know, the big investment in capacity building and in community organization. And I expect that that's going to require an increase in funding. And how is the plan, or how are the partners looking at doing that?
Oh yes, boy is it ever. And I think that's something we're always constantly thinking about and talking about. There's some good opportunities in this moment. It's broadly and federally, certainly there's some funding from kind of from the federal level that is relevant and can hopefully be at least over the next year or so, at least that's the case, can be drawn down to this work. I think also we're really lucky that in Providence at this moment, we have at the sort of political leadership level, some real support for this. We have a city council and a mayoral administration who are kind of chomping at the bit to think about and support trees. And so that doesn't mean they're, you know, opening the city coffers, but and throwing money at this, but there's a real interest and commitment to, and especially I think things like, you know, the stormwater connection and how, especially with this, you know, street flooding we've seen recently, that's been like, oh, what trees, that's green infrastructure, right? That's a thing we're going to have to look to. So there's some on the policy and finance side, there's some stuff around, you know, creating a stormwater utility, some different things that the plan goes into some detail on, but other folks locally have been working on for a long time in Providence for how we can kind of create some ongoing municipal structures, mechanisms that will help fund this. I think there's a lot of opportunity from the private sector and corporate sector, whether that means large institutional property owners who, you know, own vast swaths of land in Upper South Providence, say, that are currently paved and heat island effects and have no trees, and how can those hospitals and Landmark and et cetera be made to invest in and help to shift what that landscape, literal landscape, looks like. So that's an area, but yeah, it's going to take a lot of advocacy and pushing, and, you know, some of it is just going to be grant writing and fundraising and capital campaigns, and it's going to have to come from a lot of different places. But I think there's a strong case to be made, especially as we're seeing the ways that the trees in our forestry connect to so many of the other, you know, like climate resilience and stormwater flooding, and how it can help us, thinking of it as an investment and not just a way to use up money.
So I have another question. So the Rhode Island Woodland Partnerships, you know, are about trying to increase the impact of conservation measures through information sharing and coordination of efforts. So, you know, one small way that we're, you know, doing this now is, you know, having this as the focal topic of our meeting. So this is maybe a question just to answer now, but also to think about, since I know that some of you have, like Cassie, have been involved with the Woodland Partnership for a longer time period, but just asking how the Woodland Partnership can support the plan.
It's a good question. I don't think we have a specific ask at this moment, unless, I don't know, someone think of one. What do we want? You would need a back rub, a new iPad. But
all of us.
but for sure, the just doing that, like listening, learning, care, like even the fact that you are incorporating urban forestry as a concept or realm into your woodland partnership is like, what? You know, that's very cool and very exciting. I think there's a lot we can do across kind of urban, peri-urban, suburban, rural parts of our state to, you know, connect, even if it's just across, you know, advocacy and awareness and engagement, to connect those dots. But so being, you know, in the conversation and hearing and sharing about this is a key first step. I think that there probably will be, as we start to dig into, okay, we're going to try to move forward this specific policy recommendation thing, and here's our, you know, strategy and campaign, and ooh, who are the folks in the Woodland Partnership who we can, you know, tap and ask to help move that forward. Or I think there will be opportunities like that. Or right, where is there a great funding opportunity that cuts across, you know, these sectors and parts of the state that we might collaborate on. But yeah, that's what I'd say for now.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. I'm happy to you know, offer this sort of the, you know, meeting space for you know, future deeper dives on, you know, different aspects of the plan. Molly.
I think Doug, did you have your hand up and then put it down? I feel like you've been doing that, so I want to let you go.
Well, I thought one thing that we talked about was possibly helping with plans to management plans for natural areas like New Conconnet Hill. Christopher, I know you've already worked on that. Or Blackstone Park or other natural areas that, maybe Triggs Golf Course, that's a major, piece of property and canopy. So, and that's, the partnership has expertise in that.
Has Roger Williams Park ever had a forest stewardship plan?
No, that would be great.
Yeah, Roger Williams Park is such a fascinating entity. It's old and has seen a lot of different generations of tree choices being made on it.
Yeah, some of the woodlands are just invasive. It's all like, how can we transition some of the woodlands to, a forest that resembles something that was, pre-settlement.
That's a great area. I remember you mentioned that at one point, Doug. I think that would be a really great, tangible, kind of specific way that this group of folks could support.
Well, that could be an interesting sort of focal topic to, bring in the Roger Williams Park Conservancy, on to talk about. Let's see, Molly, would you like to go ahead now?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Christopher. So this is like a little bit of a personal interest of mine / I feel like I've talked about it with a few folks on this call, but I think that Cassie and PNPP have talked a bit about the need to plant on private property. And one of the barriers, I think, to planting on private property, I mean, there are multiple, but one of the ways in which I feel like we could be harnessing a little bit more of the energy within this group to solve some of the barriers is around the cost around tree care maintenance. So, if you put a tree on private property, it's then the responsibility of that person that's living on that land and or the person that owns the land. And so we all know on this call that tree care is not inexpensive. So what I would love and I know like this might be like a state level policy, but it's something that I'm thinking about with my program. I'm thinking about groundwork and all the private property plantings that they do, and how to reach your goal. And Providence is going to require a lot of planting on private property. Like, how can we maybe use this group to brainstorm around sliding scale, maintenance and working with specific tree care companies potentially who would offer those services, and maybe we have a pot of funding that can go towards certain qualifying places, and maybe that's within the tree equity zones that you guys have established. So just a thought in there. I'd love to like brainstorm with this group. It seems like the right crowd for that.
Yes, yes, yes. That's something, again, that was a huge, we didn't mention in our presentation, but that was a huge recurring thing for young tree maintenance, but also much, constantly we hear anecdotally, like, I don't want a new tree. I want to take down those trees in my yard because if one falls out, or my sewer, all the things. And, those are real concerns. And so I know there's some conversation, nationally, that's not just true here. There's folks nationally trying to think about what that could look like. It would be great to, start to dig into what form that could take.
Thanks for putting out that suggestion. Let's turn to you, David.
This is a great presentation, and sort of coming to it from a question of like backwards looking into the history of the trees that we have. What is the biography of a tree that's old in Providence now? So do they tend to be like what biographical track does a tree follow that allows it to become 100 years old instead of dying? So I'm thinking about people tend to be much more aggressive about cutting their brush back to the property lines. So trees probably aren't growing up in weedy, lot lines like they used to. So are we only talking about deliberately planted trees, or are there ways to learn about how to be successful by looking at the biographies of the trees that are there now?
Such a great question. Doug, do you want to take that one?
I've been thinking about this a lot and have in the past, and I think part of the inequity, one piece of that puzzle is not just ignoring certain neighborhoods, but they were built originally, like the infrastructure is different. There were working class neighborhoods back in the 19th century, immigrant neighborhoods near factories. The lots are smaller, the sidewalks are smaller, the backyards are paved. So how are you going to get a large tree? Where like Freeman Parkway on the east side, it's got much more expansive planting space, bigger parks, bigger yards, not the parking pressure. So there's an infrastructure issue. Like you can plant trees in the neighborhood, but they don't have the room to grow. So I would hope that we look at how to get more planting space, maybe more bump outs, like traffic calming bump outs to give more space for trees. Other innovative things that I don't know are slipping my mind at the moment, but we can't just go down. Well, we can, but just planting down the streets the way they are now, I think there should be some infrastructure considerations, which is a different type of investment and hard to convince public works and city officials to do that.
But maybe, some of those low tree equity areas now, they're not tree free. So what has brought about the trees that are there, and can we make more of whatever that was?
I was just making the point that for the biology part of the question, that the trees can't live to become mature trees or become old trees within that space. The trees that are there are survivors, I think. And sometimes there's space, and sometimes they've been left alone and not removed by a new property owner with all the turnover. Or I don't know, that's a tougher question. That could be something to look at, I suppose, right? Like the trees that are there, why have they survived? Maybe it's certain species.
And maybe, or as is often the case, a lot of these tree pits are certainly not up to like the best management practice standard about what a tree pit size should be or ought to be. So oftentimes they're very narrow pits. And as a result, there's a lot of ADA like non-compliance that happens around these trees. So I totally agree that we need to think of diverse and creative solutions to these issues as we go forward.
Wolf, I know you've had your hand up for a while and wanted to give you a chance to ask your question.
Let me just formulate my thoughts here. So a couple points, actually. One being that I believe in this latest infrastructure bill passed by the Biden administration, they are considering trees a component of infrastructure. So maybe there's an opportunity to gain funding through that process. I know other cities of smaller scales have been using tree equity as a component to apply for the funding and create shade and green space in that matter. And then kind of going back to the question about native versus non-native plantings, but also what are we doing to consider invasive plants? Or, are we looking at canopy closure as a whole being any canopy, or are we looking at maybe eliminating some things? Example, Ailanthus tree of heaven, since it is a vector for spotted lanternfly, that's going to be a problem for us in the future. Are there any components that will look at removing trees that are of an undesired quality or characteristic and replacing it with something that is better for the ecosystem, for diversity, for resilience to climate in the future? Or is that kind of being treated as, hey, it's a canopy, it's better than nothing?
Do you mind if I answer this one? I'll just go ahead. Cool. I'm really glad that you circled back to this topic, because I actually in the jitters of presenting, I definitely had a couple of things that I wish I had said. Please ignore me trying to fight with the afternoon light. So right now, I would say that in general, Providence is like a little reactive in some of their management methods. And so right now we don't have an ordinance strictly prohibiting planting or even the continued presence of certain species. I certainly think that there are reasons why that should happen in the future. I don't know if we're there yet. In addition, to help, I think that one issue that we've had in the past with like planting native versus non-native has been access at nurseries. Traditionally, we've or at least over the past in like recent history, we've worked with one nursery that sometimes has limited offerings, and anyone who buys trees on a large scale knows that getting what you want from one nursery, let alone like three, is sometimes hard to come by. And I think part of what we want to do in the future and what has been proposed is to not only buy from one nursery, to not only buy from like maybe multiple nurseries when one nursery or another doesn't necessarily suit the needs of Providence as a whole, because what single nursery can, but to also maybe do some work in propagating our own seedlings, to do some stratification, to work with entities in these like supporting structures to help care for that. And maybe that is a way that the Woodland folks can plug in going down the road when we're ready for that, is to help with seed stratification or to send in samples from your towns of things like that we don't usually get, like hickory, that I would consider to be really cool planting choices, or like sourwood, which can sometimes be hard to come by. I do think that there's a presence of ailanthus, there's a presence of London plane tree, there's a presence of princess tree in Providence that is
Norway maple.
Definitely Norway maple that is certainly felt imminently throughout our woodlots, and like I would certainly love to cycle that out. And it's just a matter of like when we have the capacity to start doing things like that, because there are tree leaders that like we have at PNPP who are ready to like do that, but they might live in like the best tree neighborhood in the city, and like we don't have the capacity to serve some of our like absolute like to bring that same service to like the most needed, the most under treed, under served neighborhoods in the city. And until we can do that, then like I would argue that it's not good to take trees away from the canopy until we can get to that point of capacity. So it's on our list, but we're not there yet as of February 2024.
Okay.
But certainly on our radar and something that we would like to do.
All right, thank you.
Just some comments coming into the chat here that are worth checking out. But I think tree planting capacity is something that we're confronting across the board in the Northeast, and both in urban and rural forestry. So on the rural forestry side, there's more natural regeneration, but less planting of trees in the rural woods than there are particularly in the Northwest and the Southeast. And there's some good reasons for that, in that we hope we harvest trees differently, but particularly when trying to apply a climate lens, some of those species that are projected to do well in the decades ahead are much harder to source in the Northeast. So perhaps that's something that we can work on together. It is, people are starting to work on that.
Yeah, and I know from the urban forestry side, even specifically, there's more and more talk about how to plant stock sourcing it's already an issue for everybody with it's just getting the material at all, let alone in really good quality, and let alone the species you want and the species we'd like to have. But that's going to be a key piece of the puzzle, and it's not going to be something that it can be like, oh well, just Providence or just this one program. Like we're going to have to be working kind of aggregating or working collaboratively or collectively to figure out how we're going to address those needs at a regional, at a minimum, at a regional level. I think there's also a great opportunity for, especially in the workforce development piece, for some of that like job, and there's already some little pilot things, you know, starting up in Providence and other places, but nursery, you know, jobs training around nursery growing and education stuff that could be, again, I don't remember who said it, but the idea of that being something that could be a connection point between urban and peri-urban or rural. You know, maybe you have teaching nursery propagation centers outside the city that are helping feed, you know, and stock both urban and rural forests. And could that be a teaching and jobs training tool? Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And this is a group to talk about that with.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, just thinking with $1.4 billion towards urban forestry across the country, and everyone's going to be planting trees, there's going to be a tree shortage, right? Like even more than now. That's going to be insane. You know, that's maybe one thing to plan for now, like putting in long range orders. I don't even know. Yeah.
There is a notice of funding out right now from the U.S. Forest Service, Urban Forestry, specifically to do an inventory assessment of what is the landscape look like for plants, like who are the nurseries out there, you know, regionally, nationally, who's growing what, how can we be starting to, you know, increase that and shift towards, you know, the species we know we need from a climate resilience and every other perspective.
Molly.
Yeah, just jumping on Doug's comment, and I had the same concern because I mean East Providence has a pretty ambitious plan or goal for planting, and then we have Pawtucket that got an award, and then we have the Department of Health, and then my program. So even sourcing it within Rhode Island, which is ultimately what we want to do, we want to keep our dollars within Rhode Island as much as possible, is really hard. And I've written a few comments, but Mike Sullivan, the new director of RINLA, seems very much you know, willing and able to work with all the growers that they do work with. So it's something to think about, because if you know that your goal is to plant X number of trees, you know, annually, and you want to, you know, source X number from Rhode Island, maybe it's not feasible to do 100%, but being able to like get the right species that you want and get that list to them and have them broker that. I mean, that's what I was told is what they do and what they're here for. So it is worth having a conversation. And if you haven't met Mike, if AJ's out right now, he would have been on this call, but he's been working a lot with Mike on that, and happy to, you know, introduce you if you haven't already talked to him.
That's great. That's a great tip and connection. I didn't know there was a transition there recently, but we should totally start that conversation.
Yes, I saved all that information in our slide notes already, so we have that now. Thank you so much for the info and for the awesome discourse from everyone.
This has been a great discussion following the presentation. You know, certainly one of our longer and you know, more engaging ones. Also have, you know, had good participation in today's meeting. Are there any more questions before we shift over to the policy and legislative updates? All right, and I know we've you know already sort of started to edge into, you know, a little bit of sort of conversation about policy. So we'll sort of transition into this part of the meeting. And Kate, I know you're you know certainly active on this front now, and want to start us off?
Sure. I am sure there was some discussion about the green economy bond at the Woodland Partnership meeting, but I'd be happy to fill in the gaps on what is missing and what we are asking for, as well as some of the other, you know, forestry related bills that are happening at the State House. So for those of you who have seen the budget from the governor's office, it did not have any funding for land and water conservation. I think that the only areas that sort of remain around land and water conservation are municipal resilience, some money for that, some funding for brownfields, and some money for outdoor recreation. All very important. We're so glad to see those in the bond. But all of the programs that we normally utilize to do land and water conservation work were gone. So farmland, the Farmland Preservation Program, the state open space and local open space program, and any funding for forest management on state lands or forest conservation were all removed. So over the last 4 weeks, we've been working really hard with Save the Bay, Clean Water Action, the Nature Conservancy, Audubon, and a bunch of other people to try to make sure we get the right ask and introduce a couple bills. We have an ask for $16 million for an addition to the green bond. We have a bill that's sponsored on the House side Ordean from Rep. Cotter, and Lou DePalma, the chair of finance, is putting in the companion bill on the Senate side. That would be $5 million for the Farmland Preservation Program, $5 million for the State Open Space Program to bring it back to historic funding levels, $3 million for forest management on state lands, and $3 million for local open space. So far, it's well received. We had 32 co-sponsors on the House side, which is wild. That's like half of them. And Lou DePalma, there was a mix-up with the bill that he actually introduced last week, so he's pulling that bill and reintroducing the companion bill for Cotter. So that's what's happening. Stay tuned for updates on that process. Megan Cotter and Senator Linda Ujafusa introduced bills to add 10 full-time equivalent employees to Department of Forest Environment, Division of Forest Environment. We'll see what happens with those. The old growth forest bills were introduced on the House and Senate side. It's a different bill than the last year. It's got a lot in it. It's 31 pages long. What else is going on? Hold on, I have my bill tracker up. Let me look real quick. So for those who pay attention to this stuff, there was a introduction of a bill talking about the solar siting bill from last session. What happened was there was a language issue. There was a spelling error in how the bill was made a law. So there's a law or a bill being introduced to fix that. From acres to meters or something, like it's just a mix up. The old growth bill number is, one sec. The House bill number is 7293 and the Senate bill number is 2299. So that's pretty much it. We're putting a lot of our efforts around getting the green bond funded. The way that we understand it is the bills that we are introducing are a starting point for a discussion, and the sausage is made in the background in House and Senate Finance. So we are really working on getting everyone in line on those efforts. Any questions?
Thanks
Comments,
for the broad overview.
concerns?
Okay.
Yeah.
Some of you have been participating in the sort of the forest management sort of commission that's been sort of looking at fire in particular, and it could be helpful to get an update on that too.
Sure. So there were a lot of recommendations. We were each asked to provide our own recommendations to Rep. Cotter to sort of aggregate them into some sort of plan that perhaps will also include some bills. This session, one is, getting DEM more full-time equivalents. Another is making sure we have comprehensive mapping of both fire roads on private and state lands, as well as proximity to water sources for when we do have fires. overall planning, both from the emergency management aspect of things, and also thinking through forest management, recognizing that the large majority of our state's forests are owned privately, are all going to be considered and included. I'm trying to think of anything else that was better coordination on notifications for when we do have an emergency and how the call gets out to the general public. All of that is going to be included. It is not finalized. We had a meeting to sort of discuss the recommendations, and then we are going to have one more meeting to finalize those probably in the next couple weeks, and that's probably it.
Thanks, Kate. Helpful. David.
I just wanted to say about the old growth forest bill, without saying one way or another on anything. The legislative summary that circulated about that bill was extremely misleading. You should, if you're interested in taking a position on that bill, you should read the bill, because the legislative summary really makes it sound different than it is when you read the bill. That's all.
I'll second that. I have no comment about the bill itself whatsoever.
Thanks for the heads up on the summary. Any other updates on the policy and legislative front from anyone? So hearing none, we can move into more general updates. But thanks to both of you there, and Kate, of course. So if you have an update that you'd like to share, you know, from your organization, or something that you're involved with or aware of, you could just feel free to, you know, to raise your hand or jump in respectfully and provide an update. And we'll start off with how about Scott?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Christopher. This sort of straddles the fence between. Filed our first conservation easement for a dry hydrant with Exeter Fire Department off Mail Road, which will take water out of the Queen. So we issued the easement, but they have to still go through DEM wetland permitting. But Exeter Fire is pleased that we finally did this. It took us quite a few months with legal haggling, but that's a first for us, our first dry hydrant, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, but what it means is a hydrant that has a pipe in the it's an on-demand system. In other words, it's not connected to public water.
I can describe the hydrant better if you'd like. So sure. I'm on South Foster Fire Company, and what a dry hydrant is a non-pressurized pipe, and we draft water using the truck as the apparatus to pull suction from the water body. So that's the difference between a dry hydrant and then a typical hydrant you find in a city, which is a pressurized system. And our trucks do not actually have to actively pump the water from that system. It's usually coming into us at a slightly negative pressure.
Thanks, guys. Glad to know about that. Let's go over to Mark. We haven't heard from you yet.
Howdy, sorry for chiming in late. I'm sorry I missed most of your presentation there on the Providence Tree Plan, but so be it. It's good to hear you guys are working on all that. I represent RIFCO, the Rhode Island Forest Conservators Organization, Forest Landowners Organization. We have a couple of workshops. We're in the middle of our biennial workshop series, Woodland Owner Workshop Series. We've got the next 2 Saturdays, and it'd be great to have you guys help spread the word. It's on our website, rifco.org. This coming Saturday is a workshop focused on the forest conservation easements. We got Brendan Buckless and Marina Capraro and Sam. You still on the call, Sam? Yeah, there you are. Sam Tebow with the Northern District doing a presentation on that Forest Health Works program that I know, Kate, you've been involved with, obviously. And then we're also having a presentation from Tig Tillinghast with Forest Metrics on carbon credits and that whole process of what programs are available that forest landowners can utilize to capture the value of carbon credits. There's a program coming available for small landowners. That's this coming Saturday at the West Greenwich Community House behind the library. And then next Saturday, the 24th, there's more of a woodlot business management theme where it's a lawyer, a insurance agent, and an accountant. What are the big five professionals you want on your side? Your doctor, right, for your own health, a lawyer, an insurance agent, an accountant, and your forester, right? Those are the five pros you want on your side if you own land. So we got 3 out of 5 there. And they're going to be talking about various forms of ownership, accounting practices, legal aspects of owning land, etc. You know, the land trust folks really could use some of this information, and I don't know how easily you can get the word out to them to encourage them, but there's a link on our RIFCO website to register for these programs. And this Saturday's workshop is free. Next Saturday, because there's Connecticut CEUs available for foresters and loggers, we've got at a $10 registration fee for non-members. But anyway, so it'd be great to see some of you there. Will be great to see some of you there. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark, and encourage you, for the benefit of, those who aren't able to participate in the meeting today to, send it out to the Woodland Partnerships list. You can just include a link to the RIFCO website. That's a pretty easy way to get it in front of everyone.
Yeah. Okay, I'll respond to today's email reminder and with that.
Sure. Or just if you want the headline, have it in the subject, you can just out to RI Woodland Partnership at googlegroups.com. Let's go over to Lou.
Okay, I just wanted to let you guys know we're having a 2-day workshop in April on the 11th and 12th on focusing on tree decay. We're going to be having that over at Rhode Island College. The registration had been open for arborists only, but we've opened it up widely now. Should be good. It's 2 speakers, Chris Luley, who has a book out, Wood Decay Fungi. He has a new edition out, so that'll be provided with the registration. And then Frank Wren, who is the inventor of the resistograph, which is this, if you don't know, it's a tool that can drill into trees and basically by the resistance to let you know if there's decay inside the tree. So he's going to be talking about tree biology and in biomechanics and how trees react to certain different types of fungi. So it should be really good. It's got 13 ISA credits available for that as well. So like I said, there's a fee there, but I'll put more information in the registration link on the chat here. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for letting us know. Kate, let's go over to you. I think you got a little event coming up.
Sorry. Thank you. Yes. The Land and Water Summit is March 9th. It's going to be great. Link in the chat. Early bird registration is open through tomorrow, but we are offering a pay what you can option. We have over 30 workshops and an amazing keynote and really good food, and there's going to be an after party. So just saying. That's it.
Thank you. Paul, how about you?
We have some programs coming up. We have one February 27th on Evergreen Evermore. So it's going to be a Zoom session dealing with evergreens. On March 28th, we're having one dealing with a virtual one on winter ID on April 4th, which is the first Thursday, working on a walk with the Wild Plant Society and us over at Snake Den, basically on winter ID and what's going on. We're also working on forestry for the birds, bringing it back over to Norman Bird Sanctuary, one of our co-sponsors on it, and we've just nailed down a program in late August, Stone by Stone, History of Stone Walls with Bob Thurst. So all the stuff is on our website or will be on there soon, RIRCD.org. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Appreciate that. I'll just give a couple of updates. One of my other hats is serving on the executive committee of the Yankee division of the Society of American Foresters. That's when the Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island chapters get together. We have our annual meeting coming up on Friday, March 1st in Sturbridge, Mass, the nice place called the Public House. The theme is putting climate smart forestry into practice. It's going to be, particular focus on more rural forestry as this group is. But we'll be hearing, about the Massachusetts Forest as Climate Solutions Initiative, which is something that we all in Rhode Island could, benefit from knowing about, because some parts of it might be coming our way. Be hearing from our own, TJ Boudreau and Connecticut Deep on resiliency and equity in urban forestry, and also some of the climate related opportunities, with NRCS as they relate to technical support and funding. So I'll throw that full announcement into the chat now. And then secondly, as I think some of you are aware, but the implementation of the different initial treatments at the Hillsdale Preserve, the adaptive silviculture for climate change replicate site are nearly done now. And in addition to the study and research portion of the project, outreach and information is an important part of it too. And just as I did last year, I'd love to, offer, tours and opportunities to visit for different groups, including some, organizations or interested people who may not have gotten there yet. So if you would be interested in co-organizing something, I would love to talk with you about that. Anyone else? Updates?
Hey, Fern is not on the call today because most of you know this. She's on maternity leave. And I don't know if you can see.
Oh,
baby.
Yes, indeed. Congratulations to Fern, DEM Service Forester. Bertha, that's Conrad Bird Thawley.
Yes.
So that is big news indeed. All right. Last chance for any more updates.
Mugs for the summit are back, thanks to Sam and everyone figuring out how to work the Forest Healthworks project into getting us mugs for the summit. Just saying. If we haven't enticed you to come yet, now.
Oh.
What? Is that for what? The Forest Healthworks? Are we gonna have some? Are we gonna have some that's in West Greenwich on Saturday, Sam?
That would be really impressive if they came in that amount of time, but no. But they'll look really nice.
Well, that's something to look forward to. Great. Well, there we go. Well, thanks to all of you for sticking with us, through the meeting today. Thanks again to all of you from the Providence Neighborhood Planting Program for the presentation on the tree plan, and would love to add all of you to the partnership list. And I'm confident that we'll be, returning to this in different ways. We'll talk with you about that going forward. So I think those will bring us to the end of our meeting this afternoon. As always, if there's a topic that you're interested in highlighting, for a Woodland Partnership meeting, whether it's a presentation in a virtual meeting or a tour or a walk, Kate and I would enjoy working with you on coordinating that. Preview of coming attractions, but we're sort of engaging with the New England Forestry Foundation, hoping we might hear more about their climate smart commodities program in the upcoming virtual meeting. And we do play a role in serving as the convocation body, the committee for the Forest Health Works RCPPP. So we'll be learning more about that in the upcoming months too. So we'll be in touch with details, but hope to have our next meeting on, let's see, I believe that would be Thursday, March 14th. But stay tuned. All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you joining us.
Bye-bye.
See you next time.
Thanks, Christopher.
Have a good weekend.